The arrival of the alien armada. The stars shimmered in the cold darkness of space, but tonight, something new appeared among them. A fleet of massive warships, dark and menacing, moved toward the Sol system. The Draxar Empire had arrived. Their lead ship, the Dominator, was the size of a small moon. It carried thousands of warriors, all trained to conquer and destroy. Behind it, hundreds of battle cruisers followed, their sharp metallic frames reflecting the light of distant stars. They had conquered countless worlds before. To them, Earth was just another weak species waiting to kneel. Inside the command center of the Dominator, Supreme Commander Zirax stood tall. His scaly skin shimmered under the dim red lights, his yellow eyes filled with confidence. He had led the Draxar fleet for decades, crushing any race that dared to resist. Now he would do the same to humanity. Zirax turned toward his second-in-command, General Korak. "Have they detected us?" Korak nodded. "Yes, Supreme Commander. Earth's defenses are preparing, but their ships are primitive compared to ours. Their technology is centuries behind us. This invasion will be over quickly." Zirax grinned. He enjoyed the fear in his enemies. It made his victories feel even greater. "Open a broadcast to the humans," he ordered. "Let them know their doom has arrived." A moment later, a holographic transmission was sent across Earth's military networks. On every human warship, every defense station, and even the capital cities of Earth, a terrifying image appeared. Zirax, standing in his full armor, his eyes glowing with arrogance. His voice echoed across the airwaves. "Humans, you stand before the might of the Draxar Empire. Surrender now, and we may show you mercy. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to decide your fate." On Earth, governments held emergency meetings. Generals rushed to command centers. The world's greatest minds prepared strategies. But in space, aboard the flagship U.S. Titan, something unexpected happened. Instead of fear, instead of panic, the human fleet laughed. The unexpected response. Admiral Ethan Carter, leader of the United Earth Navy, sat in his captain's chair aboard the Titan. The holographic message from Zirax played before him. The alien commander stood tall, his deep voice filled with menace. The threat was clear: surrender or die. And yet, Carter smirked. He leaned back in his chair and took a sip of coffee. Around him, his officers exchanged amused glances. Someone in the back chuckled. A moment later, the entire bridge crew burst into laughter. The Titan's communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Grant, wiped away a tear. "Sir, is this guy serious? He sounds like a villain from an old sci-fi movie." Another officer, Commander Jack Reynolds, grinned. "I swear, if he says resistance is futile, I'm gonna lose it." More laughter filled the room. The Draxar had expected fear. Instead, they were being treated like a joke. Carter tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. "Send them a reply." Grant nodded and activated the transmission. Zirax's image flickered, waiting for a response. Carter leaned forward. His face was calm, his eyes full of amusement. "Hey, Supreme Commander Zirax, right?" He took another sip of coffee. "Listen, buddy, I appreciate the dramatic entrance, but here's the thing. You're in the wrong solar system if you think we're just gonna roll over." He smiled and tilted his head. "You want an answer?" "No, we're not surrendering. In fact, we're not even taking you seriously." Zirax's face twitched in confusion. His claws dug into the metal console before him. "You dare mock the Draxar Empire?" he roared. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I mean, look, no offense, but we've seen way scarier things than you." Another officer chuckled. "My grandma's cooking is more terrifying." Laughter erupted again across the bridge. Zirax's anger grew. These humans were not afraid. This was not how things were supposed to go. Every species they had conquered trembled before them, begged for mercy, worshipped them as gods. But these humans, they were mocking him. His fists clenched. "You will regret this," he growled. "If you will not surrender, then you will burn. Fire a warning shot at their homeworld. Let them see our power." His command echoed through the fleet. A moment later, one of the Draxar battleships fired a powerful plasma cannon toward Earth's orbit. A massive ball of blue energy shot through space at incredible speed. But as it hit Earth's planetary defense shield, something unexpected happened. Nothing. The plasma ball dissolved on impact. The shield didn't even flicker. On the Titan's bridge, the crew stared for a second. Then someone snorted. Carter burst into laughter. Was that supposed to scare us? Another officer shook his head, grinning. "I think my toaster makes more power than that." Sarah Grant smirked. "Sir, should I send them a tutorial on how to invade Earth properly?" More laughter. Back aboard the Dominator, Xyrax's face turned pale. His mind raced. The humans should be afraid. They should be panicking. Instead, they were laughing at him. How was this happening? For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Xyrax felt something he had never known before. Doubt. The overconfident aliens. Inside the command deck of the Dominator, Supreme Commander Xyrax's tail twitched with frustration. The laughter from the humans still echoed in his mind. His claws tapped against the metal console as his officers stood in silence, waiting for his next order. General Korek, his second-in-command, cleared his throat. "Supreme Commander, perhaps the humans are trying to hide their fear with mockery. It is common among weaker species." Xyrax's eyes narrowed. "Mockery? No species has ever dared to laugh at us before." His voice was low, filled with simmering rage. The Draxar Empire had conquered dozens of worlds. Every time they arrived, the enemy trembled. Some begged for mercy, some fled, but none laughed. It was an insult. Aboard the U.S. Titan, Admiral Carter sat back in his chair, watching the alien fleet with a smirk. His officers were still grinning, sharing jokes about the failed plasma attack. Lieutenant Sarah Grant tilted her head. "Think they'll try again?" Carter shrugged. "Probably. They don't know we've been studying their ships for years." He turned to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant, do we have a profile on their energy weapons?" The officer nodded. "Yes, sir. Their plasma cannons have high energy output, but they lack efficiency. They lose nearly 40% of their power before even reaching a target." Carter chuckled. "Amateurs." Meanwhile, aboard the Dominator, Xyrax's patience ran out. His fist slammed against the command console. "Enough. If they will not take us seriously, we will make them." He turned to his fleet. "Order 10 battleships to move forward. Fire at full power. Show these humans what the Draxar are capable of." A moment later, 10 enormous battleships moved into formation. Their plasma cannons charged, glowing with intense blue light. Then, all at once, they fired. Massive bolts of energy shot toward the human fleet, streaking across space like burning comets. The power of 1,000 suns roared toward the Earth fleet, ready to wipe them out. Xyrax watched the screens, expecting to see human ships explode, their shields fail, their fleet crumble. But that didn't happen. Humanity's shields hold strong. As the plasma bolts reached the human fleet, something shocking happened. The moment the energy hit the Titan's shields, the blue flames scattered, absorbed effortlessly. The shield barely flickered. The other human warships remained untouched, their defenses holding without a single sign of struggle. Xyrax's eyes widened. What is this?" His officers frantically checked their data. "Supreme Commander, the human shields they are adapting to our weapons. Their technology is countering our plasma attacks." Xyrax snarled. "That's impossible. Their ships are supposed to be inferior." But they weren't. Inside the Titan, Carter let out a low whistle. "Ha, that was cute." Commander Reynolds laughed. "Sir, permission to send them a sarcastic thank you message for testing our shields." Carter smirked. "Denied. Let's keep them guessing. The entire human fleet remained untouched. The alien attack had failed. Zirax's realization. Back aboard the Dominator, panic spread among the Draxar officers. Their once unstoppable weapons had done nothing. Zirax's claws clenched. His confidence was slipping. For the first time in his career, an enemy had blocked his attack with ease. This was not how it was supposed to go. He gritted his teeth. Then we'll hit them with everything we have. All ships, full assault. Hundreds of Draxar warships charged forward, preparing for their most powerful attack yet. But on the Titan's bridge, Carter simply sighed, sipping his coffee. Well, now they're just embarrassing themselves. The battle was far from over. But one thing was already clear. Humanity wasn't the one in trouble. Humanity's unexpected response. Aboard the Dominator, Supreme Commander Zirax's tail lashed in frustration. His fleet had fired everything. 10 of their most powerful battleships had unleashed plasma hellfire. And yet, the human fleet remained untouched. It didn't make sense. Every species the Draxar had fought before had crumbled within minutes. Their technology was supposed to be superior. Their weapons were unstoppable. And yet, here were these primitive humans, laughing at them. Supreme Commander, an officer stammered, his voice shaking. The human fleet has sustained 0 damage. Their shields are still at full power. Zirax's claws tightened around the edge of his command console. This was impossible. They are mocking us, General Korek muttered, his voice laced with anger. They should be afraid, yet they act as if this is a joke. Zirax's rage boiled. He slammed his fist on the console. Prepare the fleet for a full-scale attack. I want every ship. But before he could finish, a new message appeared on the main screen. A human transmission. And there, sitting in his command chair aboard the U.S. Titan, was Admiral Ethan Carter, his face calm, amused, and holding a cup of coffee. Hey, Zirax buddy, Carter smirked. I just wanted to check in. You guys doing okay over there? I mean, you're firing all your best shots, and we're just not feeling it. In the background, laughter erupted from the Titan's bridge. Officers exchanged jokes, some pretending to yawn, as if bored by the alien assault. Zirax's hands shook with fury. You dare mock the Draxar Empire, he snarled. Carter took a slow sip of his coffee. Oh no, we're not mocking you. We're just... He glanced around at his officers. How do I say this nicely? Commander Reynolds leaned into the screen. We're disappointed. The Titan's bridge crew burst into laughter. The Draxar panic. On the Dominator, the Draxar officers exchanged nervous glances. The humans weren't just winning. They were toying with them. One officer's voice cracked. Supreme Commander, we have never encountered an enemy like this before. Their ships are stronger than ours. Zirax snarled, his mind racing. No. That was impossible. He had expected fear, submission, obedience. Instead, he got sarcasm, jokes, and laughter. His officers waited for a command, but for the first time in his life, Zirax hesitated. And then, the worst thing imaginable happened. The humans started uploading memes. Humanity's ultimate weapon, internet trolls. The human internet was already buzzing. Videos, GIFs, and posts mocking the Draxar fleet spread like wildfire. On Earth, news channels broadcast the battle live, but instead of calling it a war, they called it a one-sided comedy special. One human on social media wrote, Alien Empire, more like alien embarrassment. Another, I expected an epic space war, not a fireworks display. And the worst one, a popular GIF of Carter taking a sip of coffee, shaking his head, and saying, Is that all you've got? Zirax loses control. Zirax's eyes twitched as he stared at the screen. He saw the memes, the laughter, the way humans treated this invasion like a joke. His own fleet was starting to doubt. Some Draxar officers whispered among themselves, Some even looked afraid. If the humans weren't scared, what did that mean? "Sir," one of his officers gulped, "the humans are preparing to attack." Xerax snapped back to reality. His rage boiled over. He wouldn't allow this humiliation to continue. "All ships, advance," he roared. "We will crush these insolent creatures once and for all." But on the Titan's bridge, Carter simply smiled. He turned to his weapons officer and nodded. "Let's show them how it's done." The moment of truth. The Draxar fleet surged forward, engines burning bright as their warships charged at full speed. Plasma cannons glowed with blue fire, their turrets locking onto the human fleet. Inside the Dominator, Supreme Commander Xerax stood tall, his yellow eyes blazing with fury. "All ships, open fire. Wipe these insolent creatures from existence." Aboard the U.S. Titan, Admiral Carter watched calmly as the Draxar unleashed everything they had. Hundreds of plasma bolts filled space, a deadly rain of alien firepower streaking toward the human fleet. And then, nothing happened. The shields hold. Again. The plasma bolts collided with humanity's advanced energy shields and vanished. Not a single ship took damage. The barriers absorbed the attacks without even flickering. On the Titan's bridge, Lieutenant Sarah Grant sighed, glancing at the readings. "Sir, our shields are still at 100% power." Carter smirked. "I was hoping they'd at least scratch the paint." The officers chuckled, shaking their heads as Xerax's fleet continued to waste its energy. Commander Reynolds yawned. "Permission to send them a user manual on how to fight properly." The bridge erupted with laughter. Xerax's worst nightmare. Back on the Dominator, Xerax's hands clenched into fists. His mind raced in confusion. Why weren't their weapons working? The Draxar had studied human technology before the invasion. Their scientists had called human ships outdated, weak, inefficient. So why was this happening? An officer frantically checked the battle reports. "Supreme Commander, the human shields are adapting to our plasma weapons. They're countering our attack before we can even break through." Xerax's breath caught in his throat. No species had ever done that before. And then, the worst possible message appeared on his command screen. Primary weapon systems at 30% energy. Xerax froze. Their ships were running out of power. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, yet the Draxar fleet was already losing. He stared at the battle map in horror. His unstoppable armada was exhausting itself against an enemy that hadn't even started fighting back. The first human counterattack. Aboard the U.S. Titan, Admiral Carter leaned forward. His amusement faded, replaced with calculated precision. "We've let them play around long enough," he said. He turned to his weapons officer. "Time to remind them why Earth is off limits." The order was given. In an instant, Earth's orbital defense railguns powered up. The fleet's kinetic weapons locked onto critical targets. And then, boom! A single hypervelocity railgun round shot from one human warship. The slug, faster than any missile, more powerful than any plasma bolt, ripped through the hull of a Draxar battleship. The enemy vessel exploded instantly. Panic spreads among the Draxar. Inside the Dominator, alarms blared. Officers screamed reports as Xerax's heart pounded. They destroyed one of our battleships with a single shot." Xerax gritted his teeth. It was just luck. Fire back. Keep attacking. But the humans weren't done. More railgun rounds fired. Another enemy warship, destroyed. Another, shattered into debris. A third, torn in half by an explosion. The once mighty Draxar fleet was breaking apart. Their armor was useless against humanity's kinetic weapons. Their shields failed under the relentless assault. The unstoppable invaders were falling apart. Xerax realizes the truth. Xerax stood frozen, his mind racing. How? How had the humans beaten them so easily? He had expected a weak species, an easy victory. Instead, He was watching his empire's greatest fleet crumble before his eyes. And the worst part, the humans weren't even trying their hardest. Aboard the Titan, Admiral Carter took a final sip of his coffee and exhaled. "Let's give them a choice," he said. "Send them a message." Moments later, the Draxar fleet received a transmission. Carter's face appeared on every enemy ship's screen. His expression was calm, almost bored. "All right, Zirax. I think we both know how this ends." Zirax's breath hitched. Carter's eyes narrowed. "Leave now, and don't come back." Silence filled the Draxar command deck. Zirax felt his stomach sink. For the first time in his life, he had only one option: retreat. The human counterattack. Aboard the Dominator, Supreme Commander Zirax stood in stunned silence. His once mighty Draxar armada was in chaos. Ships were destroyed in seconds, their hulls torn apart by human railguns. Their energy reserves were depleting fast, and their plasma weapons were useless against humanity's adaptive shields. Zirax had never feared an enemy before. But now he was watching his unstoppable fleet crumble like paper before his eyes. A desperate move. One of his officers turned to him, panic in his reptilian eyes. "Supreme Commander, our forces are in disarray. Should we?" Zirax slammed his fist onto the control panel. "No, we do not retreat. We fight until the last ship." The officer hesitated. "But Supreme Commander," "I said fight." Zirax roared, his voice shaking the command deck. He turned toward his fleet. "All remaining warships, regroup. Focus fire on their lead battleship. Bring it down." In space, the remaining Draxar warships, now less than half their original numbers, gathered into a tight formation, directing their full firepower at the U.S. Titan. Massive plasma cannons charged up, glowing with deadly blue energy. This was their final attack. Inside the Titan, Admiral Carter watched the Draxar's last, desperate move on the tactical display. He sighed, shaking his head. "They still don't get it," he muttered. Lieutenant Sarah Grant raised an eyebrow. "Sir," Carter smirked, "they think they're the hunters. They don't realize they're the prey." He turned to his weapons officer. "Let's end this." The final blow. Carter's command activated every human warship in the fleet. Earth's planetary defense cannons powered up. Railguns locked onto targets. Hypersonic missiles armed and ready. And then, boom. The first missile streaked through space, hitting a Draxar cruiser dead center. The explosion ripped the ship apart in a fiery blaze. A second warship exploded. A third was obliterated in a single railgun shot. The Draxar flagship, the Dominator, took a direct hit, its shields shattered. Zirax staggered backward, watching in horror. His fleet was gone. It wasn't even a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. The moment of surrender. The Titan's bridge was calm as Carter watched the destruction unfold. The Draxar fleet had less than 10% of its forces remaining. "Sir," Commander Reynolds said, "they're breaking." Carter nodded. "Open a channel." Seconds later, Zirax's command screen flickered to life. Carter's face appeared once more, calm, casual, with that same infuriating smirk. "All right, Zirax. That's enough." Zirax's claws trembled. He wanted to scream, to fight, to die in battle. But his surviving officers were looking at him, waiting for orders. They wanted to live. Carter's voice was calm but firm. "You have two options. Option 1, keep fighting, and we wipe you out. Completely. Option 2, you take your ships, you leave, and you tell your empire that Earth is off limits. Forever." Zirax's breathing was heavy. The mighty Draxar Empire, the conquerors of dozens of worlds, was being given a choice. And the worst part, they had already lost. Zirax clenched his fists. His body shook with rage. But he wasn't stupid. With a voice heavy with shame, he muttered, "Order all remaining ships to retreat." His officers hesitated for a moment, then quickly obeyed. The Draxar retreat. One by one, the surviving Draxar warships turned away from Earth. Their engines ignited, and they fled into the darkness of space. The great Draxar armada, once feared across the stars, had been utterly humiliated. On the Titan's bridge, Admiral Carter watched the last enemy ship vanish into the void. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "See," he smiled. "That wasn't so hard." The bridge erupted in cheers. Officers celebrated, laughing and clapping as the biggest one-sided victory in history came to an end. Commander Reynolds grinned. "Sir, should we send them a thanks for playing message?" Carter chuckled. "Tempting. But no. Let's just enjoy the win." Sarah Grant smirked. "The internet's already handling that part." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She turned the screen to Earth's social media, which was exploding with memes. Draxar Empire. More like Draxar embarrassment. They came, they saw, they got wrecked. "Thanks for the free target practice, aliens." Carter shook his head, laughing. "Ah, humanity. We really are something else." Zirax's shame. Aboard the Dominator, Zirax sat in silence, his claws digging into his chair. He had suffered the greatest defeat in Draxar history. But worst of all, the humans were still laughing. Panic in the alien ranks. The Draxar fleet, once a symbol of fear across the galaxy, had been utterly crushed. The once mighty armada now limped away from Earth, their engines flickering as they retreated into the dark void of space. Inside the Dominator, Supreme Commander Zirax sat in silence. His claws dug deep into the armrests of his chair, his yellow eyes staring blankly at the screens displaying the remains of his once great fleet. How had this happened? His officers stood around him, none daring to speak. The shame was too great. One officer finally broke the silence. His voice was shaky. "Supreme Commander, what do we tell the Emperor?" Zirax's tail twitched violently. The thought made his blood turn cold. The Draxar Emperor, Vorak the Unyielding, had never accepted failure. And Zirax had not just failed, he had been humiliated. The humans had mocked him, toyed with him, and spared him not out of mercy, but because they saw him as no threat at all. His fists clenched. The entire empire would know. The news spreads across the empire. By the time the Draxar fleet returned home, the news had already spread across the stars. Leaked battle recordings showed the Draxar fleet being obliterated while human officers laughed at them. Footage of Admiral Carter casually sipping coffee during the invasion went viral. The Draxar military, once feared, had become a joke across the galaxy. On the homeworld of Draxar Prime, the streets were filled with panic and outrage. The Empire's citizens had been told all their lives that the Draxar were unstoppable, superior, invincible. And now they had been defeated without a single human casualty. Protests broke out. Some doubted the Empire's leadership. Others feared that humanity might come for them next. And at the top of the Empire, inside the Imperial Palace, Emperor Vorak sat on his throne, his eyes glowing with fury as he watched the battle footage. He turned toward the trembling Supreme Commander Zirax, who knelt before him. "Explain." The Emperor's voice was ice-cold. Zirax gulped. There was no excuse. They are stronger than we believed, Your Excellency." The Emperor's claws scraped against the armrest of his throne. "Stronger." His voice dripped with disgust. Zirax bowed his head lower. "Far stronger. Their technology is beyond what we expected. Their tactics are unpredictable. Their attitude. They are unlike any species we have ever faced." The Emperor's tail flicked. "And yet you said they were primitive before the battle." Zirax felt sweat form on his scaly forehead. "I was wrong, Your Excellency." The Emperor leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Tell me," he said, his voice low, "if we attack again, can we win?" Zirax hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise victory. But he couldn't. He had seen it firsthand. Even with their full fleet, even with their best weapons, the Draxar had never stood a chance. And he knew the humans had barely even tried. Finally, after a long pause, Xirax whispered the words that sealed his fate. No. The Emperor's eyes darkened. Xirax tensed, expecting execution. But it didn't come. Instead, the Emperor let out a slow exhale. The Empire will not forget this disgrace, he said. But we will learn from it. He turned to his advisors. From now on, Earth is a no-contact zone. No Draxar ship will approach their system. We will not provoke them. We will avoid them. His advisors nodded quickly, terrified by what they had just seen. The Draxar Empire, once the most feared force in the galaxy, had just declared humanity untouchable. Across the galaxy, a new legend is born. But it wasn't just the Draxar that had heard the news. Other alien civilizations watched the battle recordings. Some species had once feared the Draxar, but now they laughed at them. Others had considered humanity weak, but now they shuddered at the thought of facing them. A council of warlords in a distant star system debated whether they should still consider humans an easy target. The answer was a unanimous no. A neutral trading empire sent urgent messages to Earth, requesting peace treaties. A hidden species, once considering invading the Sol system, quietly erased all plans and marked "Do Not Engage" on their human strategy maps. Humanity, once thought to be insignificant, had just become one of the most feared forces in the galaxy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, aboard the U.S. Titan, Admiral Carter sat back in his chair, watching the latest news reports about the Draxar's retreat. Commander Reynolds grinned. "Sir, the Draxar Empire just declared Earth a no-contact zone. They won't be bothering us again." Carter smirked. "Good. Saves us the trouble." Sarah Grant chuckled. "And the best part, the whole galaxy is watching." Carter nodded. "Yeah, and now they'd all know." He turned toward the bridge window, staring into the vastness of space. "If they come for Earth," he said with a smile, "they better be ready." The crew laughed, and across Earth, humanity celebrated another victory. The war was over before it even began. And the message was clear. Never underestimate humanity. The final humiliation. The Draxar Empire, once feared across the galaxy, now faced its greatest shame. The fleet that had once conquered dozens of civilizations had fled from Earth like frightened prey. The Supreme Commander, Xirax, had returned in disgrace, bringing with him the worst military defeat in Draxar history. And the galaxy laughed. The fall of a reputation. On alien worlds, in space stations, and on interstellar communication networks, the humiliation of the Draxar spread like wildfire. Hollywood channels played clips of the battle repeatedly. Humans sipping coffee while ignoring plasma attacks became a viral meme. Xirax's enraged face during the human broadcast was turned into a reaction image, captioned, "When you realize you brought a knife to a gunfight." The Draxar had never faced this level of public humiliation. Even their own citizens questioned the Empire's power. A Draxar senator stood before the Imperial Council, demanding answers. "How could this happen?" he roared, slamming his fist on the podium. "We were promised human inferiority. Instead, we were outmatched, outgunned, and worst of all, mocked." The council members shifted uncomfortably. They had no answer. Xirax faces his fate. Inside the Imperial Palace, Supreme Commander Xirax stood before Emperor Forik, his head bowed. The towering Draxar ruler glared down at him, his golden eyes filled with contempt. "The Empire trusted you," the Emperor said, his voice cold. "And you failed." Xirax said nothing. There was nothing he could say. The Emperor lifted a clawed hand and pointed toward the grand doors of the palace. "You are stripped of your rank. You are banished." Xirax stiffened. "Banished? no execution. The Emperor's eyes darkened. Your humiliation is punishment enough. Your name will be erased from history. Xerax clenched his fists. He wanted to protest, to beg for a second chance, but he knew the truth. The Draxar Empire would never recover from this disgrace. He had become a symbol of failure. With his head low, Xerax left the palace, disappearing into exile. The galaxy's new reality. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other civilizations reacted to the news. Former enemies of the Draxar cheered, realizing their greatest threat had been neutralized. Trade empires sent urgent messages to Earth, eager to open negotiations. A coalition of independent planets updated their military strategies, marking Earth with a new designation. Do note ENJG. Do note EPROVOG. Even the most warlike species, those who had once dreamed of conquering new worlds, looked at humanity with newfound fear. For the first time in history, Earth was not the hunted. Earth was the apex predator. Humanity's quiet victory. Back on Earth, life continued as usual. Humans didn't see themselves as galactic conquerors. They weren't out to build empires. They weren't interested in domination. They just wanted to live in peace. But now the entire galaxy knew, if anyone dared to challenge them, they would face overwhelming force and relentless mockery. Aboard the U.S. Titan, Admiral Carter sat at his command chair, watching the latest reports. The Draxar fleet was gone. Their empire was in shambles. Commander Reynolds grinned. So, think they'll try again? Carter chuckled. Not in a million years. Lieutenant Sarah Grant smirked. I kinda wish they would. That was fun. Carter shook his head, smiling. Let's hope the next visitors are a little more reasonable. He leaned back, gazing out at the stars. Humanity had just secured its place in the galaxy, not through diplomacy, not through war, but through unshakable confidence, superior firepower, and a little bit of sarcasm. Final message to the galaxy. And so, as the Draxar faded into irrelevance, as other alien species whispered in fear, a single message spread across the stars. A warning, a lesson, and a truth that would never be forgotten. Never underestimate humanity.